Chapter 29. The previous night. I got into the car, inserted the key into the ignition, fastened my seatbelt, and just as I was about to start the engine, she entered and sat beside me. I looked at her still, waiting. It was her turn to speak, and she did.
You're upset?
No, actually I'm not. Although I feel like I have every reason to be, I replied.
Then why do you want to leave?
Because, as I told you, I don't like him. I don't want to put up with him. And I certainly don't want to welcome him into my house and have to be polite to him. I don't deal well with that kind of hypocrisy anymore. But since you extended the invitation, you should honor it. So I'll leave you to it. I trust you.
Miguel, I wanted you to be there.
But I don't want to be. And I won't be, regardless of what you want. We don't always get what we want, do we?
But Miguel, there's a reason for this.
Lilith, at this moment, I value myself more than your reasons. Yesterday, I left, and you chose to stay. I didn't ask for explanations. I don't have to, as I told you. You don't belong to me. What belongs to me is the time I have with you. What truly belongs to me is me. And if yesterday I had no patience for him, today I have even less. Go on, if you don't start making dinner now, it'll be late. Her gaze towards me was different. She knew I wasn't asserting my will, but rather preserving it and following what I believed in.
Do you want to know what happened yesterday?
Again, no.
And if I tell you anyway?
Then you'll tell me and I'll know. She paused for a moment to gather her thoughts.
If I tell you, will you stay?
No. She sighed.
Yesterday, after you left, we stayed at the bar until around 4:30. The atmosphere was pleasant, the bar was packed, much more than when you left. Right after you left, Laura was a bit sad. She wasn't expecting it, but I managed to cheer her up. After the live music ended, they started playing dance music, and the bar turned into a huge disco with everyone dancing and jumping around. Laura and I even put on a show.
You did?
Yes, we danced close together in a very sensual, provocative way.
I can only imagine how Enrique must have been drooling.
He really was.
I can almost imagine his face. He envied me so much for being a famous writer and being able to get girls like you.
Seriously?
Yes, it was the last straw for me. This was right after he listed the qualities of the girls present.
Well, anyway. Moving on. When we left, they offered to drive me to your place. I said no, that I didn't want to bother you, and that I could find a hotel nearby and spend the night there. Nonsense, Laura said, you'll stay at my place. But I don't want to bother you. I said, and she insisted, but, darling, you know you're not a bother at all. Let's not even talk about it anymore. Meanwhile, I could see the way Enrique was looking at me. He was somewhat disappointed because I was an obstacle, but at the same time, he desired me. I think in his terms, it would be something like you're so fine, but you're ruining my chance to score.
I understand his perspective, after having to come up with excuses, having someone holding a candle.
Yes, but you know, I also had doubts about what Laura might have said about us, especially by the way he was looking at me.
I doubt she said anything to him. I think she herself is still digesting what happened.
Do you think so?
I do, to be honest. I am too. She burst out laughing.
But darling, wasn't what happened absolutely natural?
It was, but it's scary. You know, I still don't quite know how to deal with her, let alone now.
You still have a lot of notions of right and wrong. Do you think what happened was wrong?
No, I just don't know if it was the right time.
Why?
Because of Enrique. She smiled. You know, I still don't understand how something happened between me and her, what led to it. In fact, I still don't understand her. Why all that, if she still feels connected to him?
Maybe she just felt lonely and confused in that moment.
Yes, but everything that followed wouldn't have been for that reason anymore.
You'll understand one day,
she said, somewhat enigmatically. I hope so.
But in the meantime, we arrived at her house. I immediately asked her where I was going to sleep, and she pointed out a bed in the guest room. Then she asked me if I was going to bed right away. I said yes, and she asked me not to go yet, that the night was still young and I didn't seem very tired. Actually, I wasn't, but I didn't want to bother them. I asked her if I could take a quick shower, and she made me feel at home. After the shower, when I came out, they were both on the living room couch. Laura asked me to stay a little while she got comfortable too. I sat next to Enrique, and we talked a bit, although the conversation between us was, I don't even know how to say.
Unhealthy.
Yes, good comparison. Unhealthy. But Laura's absence gave him some encouragement towards me, and he started to want to get closer, more intimate. He tried to touch my hair or leg, almost surreptitiously.
She looked at me for a reaction, but there was none. What I had told her was true. My head about her was extraordinarily well resolved. I knew who she was. I couldn't have an idea of how many men and women she had in her life. One more or one less wouldn't make any difference to me, only what she felt for me mattered. And if I felt that she felt it, and it mattered so much that she was here telling me all of this, I knew she was telling me this because she trusted me, and knew I wouldn't judge her. During the pause she made, I realized that what I felt for her was indeed love, but not possessive love that demanded exclusivity, that made me want to have her all to myself. Rather, it was an inclusive love, capable of understanding and accepting her, capable of understanding that she, like any other person, like myself, had the capacity to love more than one person intensely, and that what she felt for one didn't diminish what she felt for the others. On the contrary, it gave more meaning and increased that love. And at that moment, I was certain that she felt it for Laura, although I didn't know why. But it wasn't up to me to know, only to accept. And I did, she continued.
Since what he was doing wasn't explicit, I didn't distance myself in an explicit way either. Meanwhile, Laura appeared dressed in a long, transparent nightshirt, with nothing underneath. She looked very sexy, believe me. I almost wished Enrique wasn't there.
This time it was me who smiled. I could almost imagine her giving that cheeky look to Laura while biting her lower lip. I know.
Laura put on some soft music, very low so as not to disturb anyone, and then said I feel like dancing. And wanted to pull Enrique, but he refused to get up. Then she grabbed my hand and pulled me towards her. We pressed our bodies together in a tight embrace, fitting into each other, and danced like that for some time. I noticed Enrique watching us with a delighted look, and the way he looked at me, full of desire. At one point, I felt Laura's lips on my neck, giving me small but sweet kisses when she was hidden from his eyes. I started to feel hot, very hot, and I wanted her. That's when she lifted her head from my shoulder, and I imitated her. We hugged each other, bodies close together, with our bodies slowly rubbing against each other, our eyes locked on. We couldn't contain ourselves and shared a sweet, really sweet kiss, you know. You can imagine how Enrique reacted.
I don't have to imagine, I know.
Yeah. It was around this time that he got up and came over to us. When that happened, I released myself from Laura and simply apologized. Laura was somewhat confused by my attitude, but she immediately understood that I didn't want anything with Enrique. Enrique grabbed her and kissed her, then tried to grab me, but I moved away. But he was at a point where he wouldn't accept a no even if it was written on the side of a building and came straight at me.
And you?
I stopped him. You know, he suddenly looked at me with a mixture of desire in his eyes and struggling against the feeling of not wanting me, not knowing what was happening to him. I saw anger in his eyes, you know. And then he just collapsed heavily onto the couch, looking at Laura and me, with that mix of things inside him, astonished. I told him, I don't want you, Enrique.
I can't even imagine what was going on in his head.
You really can't. He suddenly got up, raised his hand to me, but as you can imagine, he couldn't touch me. He slapped Laura across the face, making her fall onto the couch. She started crying, not so much because of the aggression, but because of everything else. He turned to me and said, I bet if it were with that half-assed writer, the result would be different, wouldn't it, you bitches? Go fuck yourselves, you fucking dykes, and stormed out the door.
Well, the guy's charming.
You have no idea the state of despair Laura was in. I took her to bed, calmed her down, made her sleep. When she woke up today, she told me how dependent she was on him. The house she lives in is practically paid for by him, since her salary barely covers anything besides food. She doesn't even like him that much, but he was her way out of the loneliness she felt and took care of her. He ended up taking over her life. She was in a panic. So much so that I ended up being the one to call and invite him to dinner here tonight. There you go. Now you know everything.
Yeah, now I know. The problem is that after knowing, I feel even less inclined to have him in front of me.
I know, but we have to do something for Laura.
I understood her, and yes, I also wanted to, but not today. Can we agree on something then?
Go on.
I'll grab my laptop and head to the beach house today. You host dinner, you've invited him. He's invited. You can't back out now after dinner. You come to me, either tonight or tomorrow. Whichever works best for you, but you ask them if they want to have dinner there midweek.
Why midweek?
Because by then, I'll have the patience to deal with him. I definitely wouldn't have it today. She looked at me, and a glint passed through her eyes that didn't escape me, although I had no idea why.
That sounds good, then. You might be right. Let's settle it like that. Today, I'll excuse you and arrange some commitment I wasn't aware of, try to calm things down between them. Then I'll go to you.
I nodded. I'll be waiting for you then. She was about to leave the car, but stopped, looked back at me with a different expression from the one she had until yesterday, smiled, and unexpectedly said to me,
Do you realize that I love you too?
She didn't wait for an answer and left.